Okay, we finally got there. So this is the one that we started with, if you remember. One broken drive shaft. Yeah, I don't know why. I don't know whether it's weak casting. It doesn't look right there. I don't know if you can see that, but it looks like that. It just doesn't look right, does it? When you look at that, well, that's obviously where the flaw is in the steel. So anyway, that's what we started with. You'll have seen in the last video that I was over at Robin's and we were cutting the splines, and here's the result. So I'll get that up there so you can see. That's that end, and obviously the other end to suit. What I have got left to do just to finish it is, if you look there, there's some slots cut in there, a groove for a, well, it's not a split ring, I don't know what you call it, but I've just got that to do to finish it off. What a pain in the arse it was to do. Problems along the way. The first one was the cutter itself. In this particular sort of, I don't know what sort of steel it is, I think it's some kind of cast steel, but there are in places some really hard parts in it, and I think that was what we hit the first time, one of those, and it wiped the end clean off the top of these high speed steel cutters that I made, or ground up should I say. So anyway, I then managed to locate this, and this cut one end of this shaft, all the splines, full depth each time, 42 thousandths of an inch, and it never missed a beat. It cut it ever so well, and then all of a sudden, when I'd flipped this round and started the other end, it cut the first groove perfect, and it got 2/3 of the way up the next one. And I don't know whether this camera will pick this up, but on the bottom side of all these, the bottom side of the teeth, it's just nicked it over there, look, on every one. So anyway, we failed again. So at this point I got one end cut, started the other end, and then that went. So then what I did, I got a piece of a broken carbide drill and I ground up the end to suit, just like I did the high speed steel. And this I called at Robin's later on this afternoon, and we set up, and this was already still left in the milling machine still. So we set this up in this arbor that I'd made before and started to cut full depth, single point cutter, but made out of carbide this time. And it was chopping that out of there, or should I say machining that out of there, no problem whatsoever, until dozy bollocks me, and this is a lesson learnt this, if you've got a DRO on your machine, whether it's a mill or a lathe, never look at the DRO while you're going to turn the dials. Turn your dial and look at the work, because what I did, I grabbed the dial on the mill, and instead of moving the table from right to left, I moved it left to right. But because I was staring at the DRO, I didn't see this, and what I did, I crashed this straight into the tailstock of the dividing head. Now luckily it hit the nut on the dividing head, put a big gouge in it. I'm not bothered about that, I can just make a new nut. But it smashed the end. You know, carbide is very hard, but it's also very brittle. But you can see it chipped it right off there, just took it off. So I was nearly crying at that point. I was just looking to see which hedge that I was going to launch this freaking thing over, because I just thought, well, what else can go wrong? But when I ground that up, not last night, the night before, the piece of high speed steel that I'd already rubbed the nose off, I thought, well, I'll just do one end of this just so that I've got it. The grinder was set up to do it, so I re-ground the end of it, and luckily I took that with me. So this afternoon we'd cut about 5 or 6 splines maybe with this piece of carbide before I crashed it into the tailstock. So then we went back to this, and what we did, we slowed the RPM down. No, sorry, we was running at about 200 RPM, but instead of going full depth to start with on the splines, I went 30 thou deep and I cut to the end, came back without moving anything, and then went into the depth of 42 thou, and I kept cutting and cutting and cutting, and it seemed to be going really well. So in the end, after we cut about 10 splines, we actually we drove it in 42 thou, full depth of cut, and just cut straight through with that piece of high speed steel. Now it makes you wonder why we lost the tip of it to start with, because it is actually the same piece of steel. The only thing we can put it down to is that when we started to do this again using the high speed steel, we knew that was all we got left, because Robin hasn't got anything up there that I could have reground that piece of carbide with. So we had the coolant on, let's say about 200 RPM, and it just went straight through. Did all the splines on that end. The one thing I did change, when I measured the splines originally, we were using some thread wires. I used a thread wire of 72 thou. I used some different wires this afternoon of 143 thousandths, because I was thinking that the thread wires was going too far down and sitting in the bottom and not on, should we say, the shoulders of either side of the spline. So I put the bigger wire in, and then I took a re-measurement off the original spline, and then we checked this end in the milling machine again, and yeah, it worked out really well. Would I do it again? Yes. I think when you get jobs like this, you know, you have to bear in mind that this is a hobby of mine. I'm just playing at it, you know, dicking around in the shed outside. Would I do it the same way? No. What I would do is, in I think the first video, I said I couldn't fit this on my milling machine because I can get the dividing head and the tailstock on my table, but when I come to full travel on the table, where I need to cut the spline, the spindle is over here somewhere. You know, I can't get above it. But since realised that what I could have done, if I'd have left, say, 3 or 4 inches on the end of this shaft and turned that part down to a smaller diameter than this, I could have put that in the dividing head and then rested the other end on something on the table, made something up to hold it. Because the problem is, as you saw in the video, with the dividing it at one end and we're cutting the splines at the other end adjacent to the tailstock, it's not rigid enough. You know, it just isn't. We've got it, but that was just through taking the time and everything else. If we were cutting the spline adjacent to the dividing head, you've got a lot more mass in the dividing head and the chuck itself in the forge. You know, it's a heavy little lump, that is. And we could have just whipped through them. On my milling machine I could have done that with the horizontal setup on it, and it would have just cut these like no problem whatsoever. Then I could have spun it round. This end would have been the same, you know, if you imagine another 4 inches on here but smaller diameter, and stuck far enough out just to clear the front of the chuck. I could have cut that end. I could have then bandsawed them off or parted them off on the lathe, machined both ends up, and then finished off by machining the middle out to what it is now. So it's one of them jobs, isn't it? Don't be frightened of doing anything, because if you never do it, you never learn. And I'm not bothered that a few things went wrong, even though I was ready to throw the towel in at several points. But, you know, it's like it is, isn't it? You learn from your mistakes, because the only way you'll do it is by getting on and having a go. So, thanks to Robin. Without his milling machine, this wouldn't have been possible to do. However, like I just said, I could do this now on my machine after giving it a little bit more thought. CT Tools, I'm going to ring them and have a word with them, because it's a beautiful cutter, this, and it's high speed steel, and I'm just wondering if I think I was running this at about 400 or 500 RPM, I can't remember, inch a minute, inch and a half per minute, something like that. But I think, like I say, it's hit something hard in there, and that's what's caught this, because it's only took the bottom side of the cutter. I'll have a word with them, see what they think. I'll send them this back and get them to just resharpen it for me, so it's there if we ever need to do something else like this. And then it just remains to cut the 2 grooves in the end of this, and I can ring Paul, my friend, up and tell him he can have his 4-wheel drive back on his buggy. And that's it. We'll see you on the next one. Cheers, boys.